What's going on, football fans? Ciamarra here. It's Friday, August 17th, and we're coming at you with another episode of Controlled Chaos. Joining me on today's show, give it up for Browns quarterback Baker Mayfield.
Nah, he's not coming today. He's too busy with Hard Knocks.
You kidding me, dude? Dude, he was supposed to be my first big guest. Wow.
Stuck with me?
Really? Alright, you want to do this episode with me?
Yeah.
Alright, fuck it, let's do it. Once again, I got my good friend and the coolest Gamecock I know, Kevin Crawford, joining me on today's episode. So, you're not Baker, but how you doing today, man?
I'm good. Can't complain. Glad to be on the show again.
Good. Excited to talk about the game we love, within the game we love. In other words, fantasy football. It's where grown men pretend to be general managers and coaches. It's where gambling and chaos meet. And it's a way to win big cash prizes. So on today's episode, me and Kev are going to do Snoozers, Losers, and Transformers once again with new players. So if you haven't checked out the latest episode where I used those three categories, definitely check that out. That episode is called Nick's Fantasy Football Projections for next season, and it's available everywhere. In case you don't know or you don't remember that episode, Snoozers are players that are not expected to give fantasy owners the desired amount of points, but end up doing so. In most leagues, that's anywhere between 25 and 40 points for quarterbacks, and between 10 and 30 points for all other positions. The Snoozers mentioned in this episode were picked for the entire season, and not just daily fantasy like FanDuel or DraftKings. Losers are pretty much self-explanatory, but I'll say it anyway. These guys are expected to consistently score the desired amount of points, but unfortunately struggle or underperform throughout the season. And Transformers are players who will break out and have the best fantasy seasons of their careers. And lastly, as a bonus for this episode, we will also share our high-risk, high-reward players. All right, Kev, you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right, let's do it. All right, so my first snoozer is Tyrod Taylor. You can't ignore his receiver talent. Now he's got Mr. Receptions in Miami, Jarvis Landry. Josh Gordon, who I'm 95% sure will play this season. He just needs to... Okay, go ahead, Stephen A.
Stay off the weed!
And a decent young tight end in David Njoku. Taylor has yet to have a top-tier receiver like Landry or Gordon to throw to, besides Sammy Watkins, who was pretty inconsistent in Buffalo, but that's about as close as it gets for Taylor. Plus, Cleveland may still sign Dez Bryant. It sounds like Cleveland's been reaching out to Dez, and he's apparently not ready yet. That's what he said in a tweet a few weeks ago. He said he just wants to get his mind right. He wants to be fully ready to play a football season, and I can't blame him. I understand that he wants to get back to football. I hope he gets back to football soon, but you can't rush into it. You got to take your time. So I totally understand Dez doing that. Back to Taylor, I think he's going to take full advantage of his weapons and be a late snag in your fantasy draft. So Kev, you want to add anything to Tyrod Taylor there?
Yeah, I think Tyrod's going to outperform his expectations too, because having Baker Mayfield there is kind of lighting a fire under his ass.
Right.
And he's only there for a year, so he wants to go somewhere and get paid. And like you said, he finally has weapons that he didn't see in Buffalo. He didn't have big targets like Jarvis Landry and Josh Gordon coming back super healthy. So yeah, I think Taylor's a really good pick in anyone's draft, later round of course, but yeah.
See, I haven't heard, everyone's so high on Baker, I haven't heard, anyone talking about Taylor as, the future, Yeah. I could easily see him working his ass off and earning the number one spot. Baker Mayfield, we've yet to see what he can do. He's got a lot of promise. He looks really good. But you never know. Tyrod Taylor could sneak up and command Cleveland.
Yeah, I can see it happening. But we have to keep in mind this is a team that's going from 0-16 last year, too. So you have to give Tyrod, a little bit of time to get adjusted and that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So time will tell. But having Baker there does light that fire under Tyrod's ass, and he wants to play well. And he looks pretty good from what I've seen in Hard Knocks and what I've seen in the preseason. He looked decent.
Yeah, I agree. So who's your snoozer?
My first snoozer is John Brown, the wide receiver for the Baltimore Ravens.
Okay.
I picked him because we all have to admit Flacco's deep ball is not gone. It's not. This dude's still young. He hasn't really performed since his rookie season, but Brown's still young. He was in the same draft class as Beckham and Jarvis Landry, so he's got time. And he's a speedy guy, and he can get separation too. And I've seen it through Ravens social media. He gets separation. He catches those deep balls. He's got decent hands. I can see him putting up anywhere between 5 to 9 points a week at like a flex spot for a wide receiver. So
yeah.
he's a good late round snag for anybody who's looking for that.
I mean, if we can see what he did his rookie year with Arizona, then that would be incredible. That would be a very good snoozer pick for anyone looking for a receiver, late in the draft. So if you see John Brown, definitely consider taking John Brown.
And Michael Crabtree's there, who's a red zone threat. So it kind of takes a little bit of pressure off John Brown to really perform to like his expectations. So I think with that pressure gone, he's a little bit more relaxed, but he's going to go all out because he's on a new team, new faces, and I can see him putting in work with the Ravens.
But what about Willie Snead and Michael Crabtree? They just added those guys. How do you think he's going to do compared to them?
See, I think Crabtree's going to be the biggest red zone threat that we have, obviously, aside from tight ends and stuff, because as we've seen in the past, that is Joe Flacco's safety blanket. So, barring Michael Crabtree, I'm not too high on Willie Snead. I like the signing, but he's consistently hurt, and he doesn't really show up. I don't think that Willie Snead is anything special. He might surprise me. He might surprise a lot of people in Baltimore, but I can see John Brown being there for a few more years, and maybe Willie Snead's only there for one. It could be like a Macklin type of thing.
Could be. John Brown, he reminds me a lot of Michael Campanaro, one of the ex-Ravens who just got signed to the Tennessee Titans a few months ago. Both are very fast, both have decent hands. I think they can play well in generally any system. So I could see John Brown being that guy for the Ravens. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that comparison, I like that comparison to Michael Campanaro, but I think with John Brown, there's a little bit more talent. And
yeah.
It kind of seems to me like a little bit more drive. Like, he looks really good in practice. And I don't know, Michael Campanaro, to me, was either hurt or not performing to my expectations of what I wanted from him. He just never did that. And I think John Brown could actually overperform for my expectations and a lot of people's expectations out there who are fans of the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah, I agree. It's hard to tell, who's really better. I mean, John Brown has had, his rookie year was much better than any year Campanaro had.
Yeah.
But, John Brown, he hasn't been a factor in so long that we'll just have to wait and see how he impacts the Ravens. It's a new team, new system. That's not easy for anybody.
Yeah, you have to pay attention to the schemes and that too. You don't know how well he fit in with the Cardinals and if they switch stuff around for Carson Palmer and Larry Fitzgerald and that kind of stuff. But the Ravens have always liked that deep ball. They've always loved that deep ball, and Flacco has it. It hasn't gone away, so I'm excited to see that if John Brown can do it, if he's the one that we get.
Yeah.
All right, so Nick, who's your next snoozer?
So for my next snoozer pick, I took Marquise Goodwin, San Francisco 49ers wide receiver. They got a new quarterback in town, in case you haven't heard. He's got a lot of hype coming his way, and for a good reason. Jimmy Garoppolo looked great, won the last 5 games, and that's awesome. Also, Goodwin is an absolute speed demon. The 49ers over this offseason never drafted or signed a higher-end wide receiver like a Michael Crabtree or Jordy Nelson. So their best 2 targets seem to be still Pierre Garçon and Goodwin. Goodwin is a younger, faster receiver that has proven his skill set. Last season he finished the season with just under 1,000 yards at 962. He averaged 3 to 4 receptions per game and only 2 touchdowns. However, Jimmy Garoppolo accounted for 39.9% of his yards and 1 of his touchdown receptions in only 5 games. I see him being Garoppolo's number 1 target and flying under the radar in most fantasy drafts.
He's the 49ers' number 1 wide receiver for sure. And I love Jimmy Garoppolo, but I love Marquise Goodwin even more. I'm very high on him. I think that he's going to come out and he's really going to perform over expectations, especially with them having Jerick McKinnon there now. And Pierre Garçon is okay. He's an average wide receiver, but he's
sort of on the back end of his career.
He's on the back end of his career, and I don't think he's going to be targeted as much. But he's got short hands, and I think that's why he's still around. Is he doesn't really drop much from what we've seen.
He's pretty reliable.
Yeah, he's a reliable wide receiver. But yeah, Marquise Goodwin, I can definitely see him sticking as their number one wide receiver, and I would look for him later in the draft too, because a lot of people are going to overlook him.
All right, so who is your next snoozer?
My next snoozer is Kansas City Chiefs quarterback Pat Mahomes. I'm saying this because they obviously have weapons in Kareem Hunt, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce. This offense could be an absolute squad. And I'm very high on Pat Mahomes. I think the dude's got a cannon, and just having weapons like that, like even Sammy Watkins they brought in, and I feel like he could be a big piece of that offense. But time will tell for that. Pat Mahomes, I could see him getting you like 20 to 30 points a week. Because he's can scramble too. He's got a good arm, and I think he's going to surprise a lot of people with Kansas City. It's going to take him a little bit to kind of like get used to that scheme and starting and stuff and being used to the big lights of the NFL and the expectations of him. But I think overall Pat Mahomes is a big sleeper. Like, look for him late in your draft. But Pat Mahomes could be a QB1. I don't think he is a backup in most people's leagues.
The way you describe that, it sounds like a lot like Jared Goff last season.
Yeah.
You know, he started off, it was all about Todd Gurley. It was all about getting Gurley the ball and running it. And towards the end of the season, Goff just picked it up, and he showed what he can really do at the quarterback position, especially with a rookie in Cooper Kupp and a decent veteran Robert Woods. He made them look like studs. They had great years. I could see Mahomes doing sort of the same thing. I don't think he's going to be that great this year. I'm going to have to disagree a little bit on the snoozer part. But, you know, you never know. I could be wrong. I think Mahomes has a good first year. I think it's productive. And
it's a transition.
Yeah.
It's a transitional year. Yeah, I can see that. But also, on that note, this kind of takes a little bit of pressure off Kareem Hunt because he's going into that sophomore year. Everyone's like, oh, he's going to hit the slump, like that kind of stuff. Having everybody's eyes on Pat Mahomes and the expectations of that. If Kareem Hunt can produce, I think Pat Mahomes is going to be great too.
I could see it happening.
They bounce off each other.
I think if everyone does their job in that offense, if Tyreek Hill quits dropping balls, if Travis Kelce can stay out of trouble, if Kareem Hunt can put his head down and really run, you know, I think that offense can do anything. Sky's the limit.
Damage control.
Sorry, Kev, who's your next snoozer you got?
My next snoozer is wide receiver DeVante Parker. He's a big physical guy. He's 6'3". He was a stud in college. He got drafted in 2015, and he's always been a middle-of-the-pack type of wide receiver. In 2016, he had 744 yards and 4 touchdowns, and last year he had 670 yards and a touchdown. And he's still, I think, overlooked as a wide receiver. He goes middle of the pack every year in everyone's draft because everyone's expecting this guy to show up. He's like I said, he's a big guy, and he's a go-up-and-get-it type of wide receiver, and he's got some speed too. But every year he's sort of produced the quarterback situation is what gets to me. First year he had Tannehill, who's average at best. And then last year he had Jay Cutler throwing him the ball, and he's probably one of my most despised quarterbacks ever since he led Alshon Jeffrey into that safety and cracked his ribs. Jay Cutler's a horrible quarterback, especially now. But I'm really high on Parker. I think that look for him middle round, like probably 6th or 7th. And he's probably a wide receiver 2 or 3. And he's going to put up anywhere between 8 to 12 points a week. So it's bold, but I'm personally high on DeVante Parker.
I definitely agree with the quarterback situation. You know, I never thought Tannehill was anything special, nor Matt Moore, and obviously not Jay Cutler. I mean, he gets Tannehill again, and hopefully he's been working to get better, working to get healthier over the offseason. And, now they don't have Jarvis Landry. He's in Cleveland. So Parker could definitely emerge as the number one receiver in Miami.
Yeah, I think so too, because Kenny Stills and Danny Amendola are definitely not number one wide receivers.
Right.
I think that those guys are more looked in the slots. I think DeVante Parker's a big red zone threat, and he's look for him. It's bold, but I think he could have 1,000-yard, 5-touchdown season this year.
Tannehill's going to need to play.
Yeah, he is.
But it could happen. I could definitely see that. This guy Kenyan Drake, he looks really good. Dolphins running back. So Tannehill's not necessarily going to be needing to throw it all the time. Plus, like you said, he's got Amendola now and always reliable Kenny Stills. And DeVante Parker's a great snoozer pick. It's a good risk for, like a mid-round. What'd you say, 6th?
Yeah, 6th or 7th round.
Like 6th or 7th round. Consider DeVante Parker for sure.
All right, so who you got next?
All right, my next snoozer is Redskins wide receiver Paul Richardson. Last season in Seattle, Richardson was not a number 1 or even a number 2 target for Russell Wilson. But when Seattle needed him, they threw him the ball and he made plays. I remember he was my best snoozer pick on FanDuel when the Seahawks played the Texans. He had 6 catches for 105 yards and 2 touchdowns. Good times. I don't think I won any money though. Anyway, now he's playing for the Redskins, who just downgraded quarterbacks after they got rid of Kirk Cousins and added Alex Smith to their roster. Smith isn't a bad quarterback, but I take Cousins over him any day. And their best receivers right now are tight end Jordan Reed, who we've seen play like a great tight end, but he was injured for most of last season. He only played 6 games, and some of the Redskins' other receivers are Josh Doxson and Jamison Crowder, who are decent receivers. So, there's really no clear-cut go-to receiver for Smith yet. So I could easily see Paul Richardson stepping up in this receiving core, just like he did in Seattle when they needed him the most.
I could see him stepping up. This is about which wide receiver is really going to emerge. I think all 3 of them have potential to do it. I'm high on Josh Doxson. He hasn't performed to what I expected him to do. But Paul Richardson, being in Seattle and moving to the Redskins, I think that's kind of a similar scheme. So I think he'll fit really well with the Redskins. And if Jordan Reed can stay healthy, that's going to take a lot of pressure off of him and Alex Smith too. So I could see Richardson performing pretty well this season. What do you think he does in fantasy?
I think Paul Richardson is a real late pick. But I think he's a great late pick, and that's why I made him my snoozer. If I had to guess stats, if that's what you're looking for, I'd say about 700 yards, around 6 or 7 touchdowns.
Ooh.
4 or 5 touchdowns.
Yeah. 6 or 7, that's a bold statement.
Hey, when Russell Wilson needed him, man, he was there. But, a lot of times they were throwing to Jimmy Graham or Doug Baldwin, who were even more reliable, but Paul Richardson is nonetheless a very reliable receiver. All right, so now we're on to the losers segment. And the first loser I picked is quarterback Andy Dalton. At this point, Andy Dalton is like another way to say average NFL quarterback. And yet every year that I've played fantasy football, nearly everyone who doesn't have a quarterback better than Jameis Winston, like mid-season, goes after Andy Dalton on the waiver wire when he plays the Browns or the Jets or some other subpar defense. And sometimes it works out, but you can ask anyone who's ever done that, and they will tell you you don't want to be that guy. So get a couple solid quarterbacks in your draft, at least as good as Jared Goff or Jimmy Garoppolo, and don't be that guy. Cutler's not playing anymore, so what other quarterback am I going to make jokes about, right? All right.
Yeah,
what do you think, Kev?
Andy Dalton is, like you said, average at best. I wouldn't even put him at average. Andy Dalton, especially for fantasy, never performs the way you think he's going to. He either lights it up or he absolutely falls on his face. And I think the Bengals are going to be the worst team in the AFC North this year.
Wow. Think they do worse than the Browns?
I think they do worse than the Browns.
I could see it. It's not that crazy.
But Andy Dalton, do not draft him. You can find a quarterback in the late rounds that's going to produce 10 to 15 more points a week than he is. And I've been that guy. I've been searching on the waiver wire before. And I will never go after him. I am very low on Andy Dalton. I think he's on a real steep decline. He's been on a decline. And I think he's out of that organization soon. But look for other quarterbacks in the late rounds like Case Keenum.
Yeah, even if you got to go that low. I think Keenum's going to have a good season.
Yeah, Keenan could. Kirk Cousins is even going to be a late round pick. So nobody needs to go after Andy Dalton. He's going to go undrafted. And if he doesn't, I will be shocked.
At least in most leagues, he'll go undrafted.
Leagues where people know what they're doing.
Yeah,
he'll
right.
go undrafted.
Yeah, people not like your cousin Jay. Yeah, don't auto pick either. That'll ruin you.
Yeah, auto picking is for no man, especially if you got money on the line.
So Kev, who is your first loser you got?
My first loser is quarterback Dak Prescott, and that might surprise a lot of people because he has shown that he's a great quarterback, but doesn't have Des Bryant anymore. Who knows what Ezekiel Elliott's going to do? I love Ezekiel Elliott, but you don't know if he's going to get in trouble or if he's going to get hurt or anything like that.
Yeah,
doesn't have Dez. They brought in Allen Hurns. They lost Jason Witten, who's kind of a safety blanket.
Yeah.
He's a big target. And that offensive line is obviously probably one of the best in the NFL. Like, nobody can really argue that. But I just think Dak kind of loses it this year, and he kind of falls to the bottom of the pack of quarterbacks, mid-pack, bottom pack. But in most leagues, he's probably going to go in the 6th or 7th round, maybe even a little bit earlier, because people are very high on him.
Yeah.
Because of the skills that he's shown. He's able to scramble. He's got a decent arm.
Like you said about Witten, I think that's bigger than people think. You know, people look at Witten like a guy who should have retired maybe a year or two ago because he's not explosive anymore. He was a security blanket, like you said, and also losing Dez, like both of those guys, that's really gonna hurt.
It's a major hit to that offense.
Yeah, without a doubt. Because Elliott is without a doubt their best player, and he's gonna do his thing.
Super high ceiling.
Yeah, but that's who Dak learned the game with. That's who he started with. And I think it's going to be huge now that both of them are no longer on the Cowboys.
Yeah, who knows how that chemistry works out, because like you said, he started with Dez, and like he knew Dez's tendencies. He knew where to throw the ball to him. The same thing with Witten. Witten was amazing at slants across the middle somehow as an older big guy.
Right, he wasn't scared.
Yeah, he lost that, and he lost a big possession wide receiver in Des Bryant, even though Dez was a little lackluster towards the end of his career with the Cowboys. But that being said, I think Dak Prescott should be avoided in most fantasy leagues. I mean, he's not a bad backup, don't get me wrong. He's better than Andy Dalton. But avoid him for your QB1 spot.
All right, so Kev, who is your next loser?
My next loser is the man I love to hate, wide receiver Amari Cooper.
Uh-oh, here we go.
I think that he's been way underperforming people's expectations. He is a big wide receiver. He's got talent. He's good. Like, don't get me wrong. I think he has a high ceiling. But they brought in Jordy Nelson, and Derek Carr's throwing him the ball. Amari Cooper is a bust again this year, as he was last year. He ruined my fantasy team, and I'm a little biased towards him. But avoid Amari Cooper at all costs. I think he is a flex spot at best. He's probably going to put up maybe averaging 7 to 10 points a week, which is not good for someone who's supposed to be a wide receiver one. Someone who's supposed to perform every week and be consistent. He's the most inconsistent wide receiver I have seen in fantasy in the past 2 seasons.
You know, I could definitely see Martavis Bryant filling Crabtree's shoes, and the same story happening, just like you said, with his fantasy season last year. But don't forget, Amari Cooper is still a great talent, a great receiver, and arguably Derek Carr's go-to. But, you know, they got Jordy Nelson now. They got Bryant, like I just said. And
they still have Marshawn.
Yeah, they still got beast mode in the running game. And Doug Martin, who knows what he's going to do. But it's another guy that's a lot of other places Derek Carr could go with the ball. And we've seen him do that plenty of times, like last season. So I wouldn't necessarily ignore Amari Cooper, but you need to beware. He was on and off last season, a lot more off than on.
And I would draft him again, but only in the late rounds, like maybe 7 or 8. If he's still there, yeah, I'm going to snag him. But he's not going to be there, let's be real. I was the same way with Kelvin Benjamin 3 years ago when he started to decline.
Yeah.
I drafted him 2 seasons in a row, and both of them were subpar. And he's still not doing what he should be. He's a wide receiver 1, and I just see the Kelvin Benjamin and Amari Cooper, same story. I can see that happening. Who knows if Kelvin Benjamin bounces back this year, but I don't think Amari Cooper will.
And that's another good point that you made about Kelvin Benjamin. A lot of these guys, once they prove themselves, it's like they get comfortable and they don't feel like they have to be the best on their team or be the best receiver or whatever. If they can do the bare minimum, do what the coach expects them to do, then a lot of these guys are going to do it. And it sucks as a fantasy owner and a fan of the game, but a lot of guys do it to collect a check, to go home and do football as a job.
It's more laziness. It's because these guys are supposed to be wide receiver 1s, and there's pure talent in Kelvin Benjamin and Amari Cooper, and we just haven't seen that in the past 2-3 seasons. And it's just disappointing because you get these guys kind of not middle of the draft, probably around 4th or 5th round is when you start looking for wide receivers like that, who's not like an Odell Beckham or a Julio or something like that, but some guy who's going to be consistent and some guy who is going to be your wide receiver 2 spot.
Yeah, I agree.
So who's your next loser?
My next loser, and I hated to pick this guy for a loser, but I got to go with my gut. It's Dalvin Cook. I hope I'm wrong, but I think Dalvin Cook hits a bit of a wall like Kareem Hunt did last season. Also, the Vikings will most likely start the season with Latavius Murray and Cook sharing carries because alone they have both shown that they have potential to be explosive running backs on a week-to-week basis. So if I'm Mike Zimmer, I'm using them both equally and not using up Cook too much or using Murray too much. Plus, they got Kirk Cousins in at quarterback now, newly signed quarterback, with Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen, who are just getting better every year, and I see them not leaning on just one running back for a lot of their offensive snaps.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to disagree with the fact that he's a loser because I think Dalvin Cook is actually going to have a really productive season, but I would have to agree with you on the fantasy side of things where I would avoid him in the first round or the second round where a lot of these analysts have him going. And I just don't think he's going to be a productive back like that. I don't think he's going to show up every week and give you 15 to 20 points like Le'Veon Bell, Gurley, or Melvin Gordon are doing. I think this guy is probably going to be anywhere between 8 and 12 a week, especially sharing carries with Murray, who you said has proven that he's a starting caliber back. Anywhere else in the league, he could start.
That's a good point. And it's sort of what I'm saying, but I think Cook all by himself, even sharing carries with Murray, he's going to hit his own little wall, and I think maybe they give Murray some more carries because he's been in the league longer. He knows what it takes to run the ball every week consistently, 20 carries a game, and unfortunately, my gut feeling says I think Cook, he has his bright spots, but I think he hits a wall, and I think he struggles. And
I do think these running backs, Murray and Cook, start to get less touches because they brought in Kirk Cousins, and like you said, Thielen he's shown that he's reliable, and Stephon Diggs is a speed demon and deep threat. And who knows, maybe Laquan Treadwell shows up this season. So look for him super late, but he could be another sleeper as well. But all in all, like you were saying, I think Dalvin Cook in fantasy is probably going to be a loser for where people take him.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
So, you think he gets taken too early?
I think he's taken too early, and he's not that productive player.
Yeah, if you're not paying attention to this shit like we do, you're going to think, if you played last year, you're going to think Cook is their guy, and you're going to think that he's going to just start over Murray.
Because he lit it up the first, 2 weeks?
Right. And that's, that could be the case, but I doubt Mike Zimmer's going with that.
Yeah, and it's risky to do that, to take a running back who has a handcuff with your first round pick. All right, Nick, so who's your last loser?
My last loser is wide receiver Sammy Watkins. Just got signed to Kansas City over this offseason, and now he's got second-year starting quarterback Patrick Mahomes, who no one is really sure how he will do because he only played one game last year against Denver after Kansas City locked up a playoff spot. And he also has 2 Pro Bowl targets to throw to, Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. You know, if Mahomes does well, I could see Watkins being a snoozer for a few weeks out of the season. But other than that, I wouldn't count on Watkins. You know, last season in LA with Jared Goff throwing to him, he averaged about 37 yards per game and scored only 8 touchdowns. Last season in LA with Jared Goff throwing to him, he averaged 37 yards per game and scored 8 touchdowns, which are decent numbers, but not great fantasy numbers or reliable numbers for that matter. So with a likely downgrade at quarterback from Goff to Mahomes and better targets around Watkins, I would stay away from him unless you don't have any superior options in a later round of your fantasy draft.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I wouldn't take him anywhere before the 10th round, honestly, because, like you said, it's a downgrade at quarterback, and Watkins hasn't really been what we've seen before lately.
Right.
And, I mean, he's still got speed, don't get me wrong, but you haven't really seen the separation that he used to get. And he used to light it up down the field. He was electric to watch, but Watkins is a very late-round pick and possibly a waiver wire target for certain weeks where they're playing teams with a lockdown corner that's going to press Tyreek Hill that whole time. And like you said, they have Travis Kelce there, who's obviously going to be a safety blanket for Mahomes, especially his first season starting. I feel like that's going to be his go-to guy is Travis Kelce. And they have Kareem Hunt, so who knows what he does. But, yeah, stay away from Watkins. I could see him getting around like 400 or 500 yards, maybe 2 or 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with those numbers. I don't think he's going to be a waiver wire target. I mean, he could be. I also don't think he's going to do that great. So, depending on how many people you have in your league, he may or may not wind up on a team after the draft. But either way, I would pay attention to Watkins, but I would lean more towards staying away.
Yeah, I would stay away as well. And it also depends on how he does the first 2 or 3 weeks, because he's going to get drafted in people's leagues. There's no doubt about that. But like I said, it depends on how he performs the first few weeks. If he's playing poorly, he'll most likely get dropped, and he's going to be a waiver wire target. But if you see somebody drop him, I would definitely pick him up, especially if you have extra bench spots, because he could perform. And like I said, going against defenses with lockdown corners, you might want to put Sammy Watkins in at a flex. I would never start him at a wide receiver spot, but putting him at a flex gives you kind of room to wiggle with. If you don't have any superior options like a running back or anything like that to put in your flex.
Mm-hmm. I think you're right. If I were to say anything else, it would pretty much be what I just said before you said that. So that's about it. All right, so Kev, who's your last loser?
My last loser is running back Mark Ingram for the New Orleans Saints. Might surprise a lot of people, but he's already a loser. He's suspended. And Ciamarra is going to come in, and he could very well light it up. And when Ingram comes back, they're obviously going to start feeding him the ball again because he's a workhorse too. But he's going to be playing catch-up. And I think Ingram is overvalued on his draft pick. I think he's going probably 3rd or 4th round, even though he's suspended, because people have seen what he's done. And him and Ciamarra both lit it up last season. So don't be surprised if you see him go early, but I would avoid him until probably 6th round.
6th round.
Yeah, 6th round. If he's still there, definitely grab him. But for now, I would avoid him and just let him go off the board. You could get somebody who's going to produce for the first 3 or 4 weeks without him there.
See, my big thing is I think Alvin Kamara is the determining factor in whether or not Ingram is a loser or not. You know, last season, Kamara never rushed for more than like 12 times a game. Ingram rushed for 20 to 30 times a game. So this is something new for Ciamarra. You know, we'll see if they give him a lot of carries. They just got Terrence West, who's decent. He's nothing real special. But
similar play type to Mark Ingram. He's a power back, one-cut power back.
Yeah, very similar to Mark Ingram. And if Kamara does perform and solidifies himself as the starter, then I think Mark Ingram is definitely a loser, and he'll probably try to get traded. If Kamara only shows that he's that receiving back that can rush the ball 6 to 9 times a game, then I think Ingram won't be a loser. I think he'll come back and they'll be the dynamic duo again. But I think a lot of it is on the shoulders of Sean Payton and Alvin Kamara.
Yeah, who knows where Sean Payton puts these carries, because if he gives Kamara a full workload, I mean, we've seen it with him in Tennessee, but who knows if he can handle an NFL workload, because he was used
You're talking about his college days, right?
Yeah,
in
his
Tennessee.
college days.
Okay.
And who knows if he can handle that full workload, especially being that labeled pass-catching back that he is. I still think he's first-round talent in fantasy drafts. I still think you should definitely grab Kamara. But sophomore slump, who knows if he hits that? We don't know if he hits a wall. And like you said, it's where Sean Payton puts it and how Kamara performs.
Yep, that's it. All right, so that's about it for Ingram. How about you kick off the Transformer segment, Kev? Who you got first?
First Transformer is running back Jerick McKinnon for the 49ers. I'm really high on McKinnon, and him going into that offense I think is a perfect fit for him, with Jimmy Garoppolo throwing him the ball, and Marquise Goodwin's going to take a little bit of pressure off him too. But we've seen that McKinnon is both a running back and a pass-catching back, and I think that he's going to perform above expectations. And where he sits now, I think he's probably a late 4th round, early 5th round pick in people's fantasy drafts. And I think he could very well be a running back 1 type of player, depending on how he opens up that field for Garoppolo. Could become sort of a safety blanket, because they don't really have a tight end and they don't have other big name wide receivers. Marquise Goodwin's their number 1, and I'm high on him, but who knows what he does. And I think McKinnon's really going to open up that field.
See, in my last episode, I had McKinnon as a loser because we've never really seen him be a true ball carrier. He's always been more of like a Deion Lewis, a pass-catching back, and I think he does well at that. I think he's pretty good, but if all he's doing is catching passes, I don't see him as, having a breakout season or being anything too special. If they had, like last year in Minnesota, they had Murray. Murray would run the ball, McKinnon would catch passes, and it worked out perfectly. I don't think he has a whole lot of success running the ball, but you never know. I could be wrong. McKinnon is a lot of talent. He's quick. He will hit you in the mouth, and it'll be exciting to see, but if I'm betting on it, I'm putting him as a loser.
My biggest thing is that he finally has a full workload, and we haven't seen him get that. He doesn't have a handcuff in San Francisco. There's no one really to hold him back. So this is all willpower, I feel like, for McKinnon. Like, does he want it? I think McKinnon can handle a workload. It just really depends on how this offense uses him.
Yeah, that's a big if. I mean, we've still yet to see Jimmy Garoppolo in a full season. We've yet to see new coach Kyle Shanahan really work with Garoppolo through a full season. And they didn't look great last year. Before Garoppolo showed up, they were a 1-win team, and that sucks. So there's a lot that's going to go into their success. They're going to need to do a lot, and even though a lot of people think they're going to do great, it's a lot more than just having a good quarterback and a few playmakers here and there. You need a lot.
Yeah, Garoppolo in a way is limited to going to certain options. He only really has Marquise Goodwin and McKinnon that are those big playmakers we've seen before. And Jimmy Garoppolo, although we know he's a winner, he's definitely a winner, he knows how to win, still has to prove himself. I don't think he's anywhere near worth that contract he got. It could end up like a Brock Osweiler situation. I don't think it will, because I'm high on Garoppolo. But given that sample size, it's the same signing.
Yeah, I talked about Brock Osweiler in my last episode and compared him to Garoppolo. And that's a huge deal, people thought, this kid learned from Peyton Manning. Aaron Rodgers learned from Brett Favre. The same thing can happen. And it didn't. It turned out terrible. He went to the Browns, came back.
They ended up paying him his guaranteed money.
Yeah, an awful dumpster fire, pretty much. But, I don't think Garoppolo is that guy. I think he's not making the young mistakes that Osweiler was making when he was playing for Denver or Houston or even Cleveland. I think Jimmy G's got his head in the right place. I think he wants to win. He wants to be a team player. And he's learned a lot from the greatest quarterback of this generation.
When you pick DeShone Kizer over a $75 million quarterback, you know there's a few issues behind that.
Nothing more Cleveland, right?
No. All right, Nick, so who's your first transformer?
First transformer I picked is Miami Dolphins running back Kenyan Drake. About a week ago, newly signed Dolphin and future Hall of Fame running back Frank Gore said, quote, "I kind of see why the Miami Dolphins traded Jay Ajayi. Last season after Ajayi got traded out of nowhere in late October, Kenyan Drake popped up on the fantasy scene and established himself as a starting running back for the Dolphins, finishing the season with 848 total yards, putting him at an average of 94.2 yards per game. To be clear, these stats were recorded after Jay Ajayi was traded, and they're going to get even greater when it's all said and done after next season.
Yeah, I can see it. I love Kenyan Drake. I do kind of see why they got rid of Ajayi with him, especially having Kenyan Drake there. We saw that he can perform when he was in college, especially at the University of Alabama. He had 644 rushing yards last year and 3 touchdowns, which is pretty good for starting halfway through the season after Ajayi left. And I'm high on him. I think he's mid-round pick, probably like 5th or 6th. He is a starting running back. Don't get me wrong there. But I think a lot of people are kind of hesitant towards him. And I think you could kind of hold off on getting him a little bit. But I think he's a mid-round gem.
Yeah, I think if I had to bet, I'd say 4th or 5th. The way he played last season. 94.2 yards per game. He was a starter.
Even when he wasn't a starter, he averaged 4.8 yards per carry.
Which is
really good.
That's really good.
It is the Dolphins' offense, though, so keep that in mind.
So what do you think about Gore saying what he said?
I like it. I like it. Gore's kind of like an outspoken dude. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't knocking Ajayi. It was just giving Kenyan Drake praise, I feel like.
Right, I agree.
And he's in Miami, so he knows, he's an older guy. He knows he's not there for long, so he's just like, this dude's good, and I'm admitting it. He's definitely going to start. I'm just here to help.
Uh-huh.
I like that. I love Frank Gore. I can't wait till he gets inducted.
Yeah, me too.
Totally deserves it. All right, Nick, so who's your next transformer?
All right, so my next transformer, I think this guy is going to have the best season of his career, even though he hasn't been in the league long. So it's a pretty simple answer, but I'm going to say it anyway because he's a great fantasy option. His name's Cooper Kupp, and he's a wide receiver for the Los Angeles Rams. Last season, he was 5th overall in the NFL in red zone targets with 23. He had the 17th highest grade for a wide receiver in the NFL last season. And he's a clear-cut slot receiver. So, I think Cooper Kupp is a great, maybe 7th, 8th round pick in your draft. And he's got Jared Goff thrown to him, who's a good quarterback. He's shown that he's improving over these past few seasons. Even took them to the playoffs last year. And now, this kind of hurts my argument, but they got Brandon Cooks and Robert Woods also in that receiving core, which will sort of hurt his fantasy numbers, but at the same time help him, and he won't have to carry as much of a load. So I think Jared Goff loves Cooper Kupp. I think he loves throwing to him in the red zone especially, and I would definitely try to look for Cooper Kupp in the 7th or 8th round.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. He would be a great 8th round pick. This is a guy we're talking about. I feel like could have about anywhere between 35 to 60 yards a game, and he's one of those wide receivers that gets targeted so often in the red zone that he could have 2 touchdowns.
You're giving him a ceiling of 60 yards?
Not a ceiling of 60 yards. I'm just saying that's average. I think for weekly, on a weekly basis, I think you see anywhere between 35 and 60 yards in one.
Okay.
He could be that kind of guy that gets 2 touchdowns a game but only has 3 targets. So there's your production right there. That's 12 points.
Right. Plus whatever
yards he gets, yeah. So he's obviously targeted a lot in the red zone, and I like the dude. I'm really high on him. I think it will be an even better season than last year for him. And Goff's a great quarterback, and they did bring in Brandon Cooks, but he's more of a vertical threat, I feel like, than anything else. And you want to throw to your red zone guy. So I think Jared Goff's going to kind of find that connection in the end zone with Cooper Kupp a lot more next season than we saw last season.
So Cooper Kupp could definitely be a great wide receiver 3, maybe even a wide receiver 2. So we're going to have to see how Cooper Kupp performs in his sophomore season. All right, so Kev, who is your next transformer you got?
My next transformer is tight end Jimmy Graham from the Green Bay Packers. I listened to that episode, and I really agreed with you on this aspect. I think this is going to be Jimmy Graham's best season since being traded away to Seattle from New Orleans. And he had Russell Wilson there. He hasn't really put up the numbers that he was used to putting up in New Orleans. And I think now, especially moving to Green Bay, he really fits in with that scheme. And Aaron Rodgers is going to kind of find him as a safety blanket. And I know we talk about safety blankets a lot. Aaron Rodgers doesn't need them. Like, let's be real. But I think Jimmy Graham is going to be highly targeted in the end zone and down the field with those checkdowns that Aaron Rodgers likes to do. I think Jimmy Graham could easily have a 1,000-yard, 12-touchdown season with the Green Bay Packers. So look for him. He is a tight end, but I would look for him around like the 5th or 6th round, somewhere in there. And
yeah, that sounds about right. When I talked about him in the episode you brought up, I said pretty much the same thing. With a quarterback like Rodgers who likes his tight ends, I could see Graham reaching that 1,200-yard mark, getting plenty of touchdowns, especially, after Rodgers loses his favorite target, Jordy Nelson. So there's a lot of signs that point to Jimmy Graham having a breakout season.
Yeah, and he's got DeVante Adams there too, and Randall Cobb, who's kind of been lackluster, but he's still a decent wide receiver. Mm-hmm. And this running back, Aaron Jones, that people seem to be pretty high about, even though he's suspended. But
and Jamal Williams, he had a pretty good season last year.
Ty Montgomery's still there.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to see Jimmy Graham really incorporated in this offense, and he's going to become one of Aaron Rodgers' favorite targets down the road.
All right, so Kev, who is your last transformer you got?
My last transformer is wide receiver Jarvis Landry for the Cleveland Browns.
Okay.
I think that he's going to put up the best numbers of his career because he finally has a decent quarterback in Tyrod Taylor. And we know Tyrod can win. He took the Bills to the postseason for the first time in a while. And they brought in other offensive weapons this offseason, like when they drafted Antonio Callaway, he looks pretty good. They got rid of Corey Coleman. That's a missing piece, but that was never really there. And they have David Njoku, who I'm really impressed by, especially from watching Hard Knocks. And he looks good. They got Josh Gordon. If he can keep his mind right and stay healthy, stay off the marijuana, he's going to be a deep threat too. But all that being said, I think Jarvis is the number one wide receiver. He's going to be the number one targeted player on that offense this season. And he's posted multiple 1,000-yard seasons with the Dolphins. And he had Ryan Tannehill, Matt Moore, and Jay Cutler throwing to him. And I think Jarvis Landry could go for around 1,200 yards, 10 touchdowns maybe. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the season. He also, in an interview, really praised Todd Haley about his offensive coordinator skills. And he said he wasn't used right in Miami. And when a guy like that says he wasn't used right, who puts up 1,000-yard seasons consecutively, and he says that, he's about to ball out. Like,
right.
If someone's using that piece right, he knows that that's on him. Like, he's like, I'm going to fit in well with this. And he's all in with the Browns.
Coming into his fourth year, doing as well as he has, I believe Jarvis Landry, he knows what he's talking about. He's on the right team with the right support. I think it's going to take some time to get used to. As we've seen on Hard Knocks, if you haven't already seen online, him fighting his teammates and getting really pissed off at some of his teammates for not practicing, not playing as hard as they should. And, I think a lot of that is him trying to knock out the culture in Cleveland. Get rid of this losing mentality. Like, I get paid, I go home, doesn't matter if we win or lose. Like, Jarvis Landry is there to change that culture. And, whether we're talking real football or fantasy, I think he makes a huge impact this season, puts up some great numbers. I don't know if he does better than he did in Miami. That's a big if. but, I think he does very well, and he should definitely be somebody every draft takes him in probably the fourth round.
Fourth round?
Fourth round.
Yeah. I would say third or fourth, around there. And look for him to be your wide receiver one. Like, he's going to put up those kind of numbers and be that productive, I think. I don't think he has a floor. I think he has a super high ceiling. All right, Nick, so who's your last Transformer?
All right, my last Transformer is probably one of my favorite fantasy options in the mid-rounds this season. His name's Derrick Henry, and he's the best running back on the Tennessee Titans. He looked so good in that playoff game against Kansas City, where it seemed like he just got better and better each carry, getting more yards, finished with 155, and by the end of the game, he was popping off that huge run, just running through Kansas City like he was on a mission, like he will be this season. And also keep in mind, they don't have DeMarco Murray anymore because he retired recently. And, I think Derrick Henry has the best season of his career. I think he's the lead running back in Tennessee. And I'm excited about Henry, and I hope he winds up on my team.
Yeah, I have to agree with you about Derrick Henry. I think that he's definitely the clear-cut number one back. And this player, to me in particular, has progressed the fastest that I've seen out of any running back that was drafted in his class. You get these guys that come out and they produce 1,000-yard seasons their rookie year, but what happens? They fall off. They hit that sophomore slump, or they get hurt or something like that. Derrick Henry has been consistently moving up and getting better, and I'm really excited to see him. I think the best thing for him was sitting behind DeMarco Murray and learning, not taking that full workload. I think he does have the best season of his career. I think he could have well over 1,000 yards and probably 8 to 9 touchdowns. And you could probably look for him in around the 5th round, 6th round maybe. 6th round's kind of a stretch. I don't know if he'll fall that far in most leagues because there are a lot of people that are really high on Derrick Henry, but there are some people that are very low on him as well.
I think I'm taking him in 3rd or the 4th, man.
Oof, that's early. I mean, he is their starting running back.
Gotta see what everyone else does, but man, I think Derrick Henry is gonna be great.
Yeah, I would have to agree.
Like Pro Bowl season, lights out.
And Mariota could produce too.
Yeah, I think Mariota, he could easily be in this category too.
And we said that in one of the previous episodes. The Titans have the NFL have them ranked at the 5th best offensive line in the NFL.
Yeah.
So
no wonder Taylor Lewan just got that big paycheck.
Yeah, well deserved. And I think Derrick Henry will light it up this season, like you said.
All right, so for the final segment, as a bonus, we're going to do high-risk, high-reward players. Kev's got one and I've got one. We're just going to go back and forth. And I'm going to start it off with Kansas City Chiefs running back Kareem Hunt. Last season, everyone was so impressed with how he entered the league, him just going off against the Patriots, putting up 148 rushing yards and 98 receiving yards, along with 3 touchdowns. It was an incredible fantasy night, one of the best fantasy nights I've ever seen, especially on a Thursday night opener. But after week 5, Kareem Hunt's big games with a lot of rushing yards and a few touchdowns started to decrease, and that continued on until week 13. So that's 7 weeks without Kareem Hunt rushing over 100 yards or scoring a touchdown, and that killed many fantasy owners. I mean, he started the season so strong, and then after week 5, it just went downhill, and a lot of people banked on Kareem Hunt in their draft. Like, they had a feeling that he was going to be this good, but, by the end of the season, he did pick it up. He did start playing well. He had that big game against the Raiders and then a big game against the Chargers where he put up over 100 yards in both games, scoring multiple touchdowns against the Chargers and 1 against the Raiders. So we've all seen what Kareem Hunt can do, but will he remain consistent? Will he be a reliable top-tier running back like a Le'Veon Bell or a Todd Gurley? Kareem Hunt has a high ceiling, but he also has a low floor, and that's why he's my high-risk, high-reward player.
Yeah, we did kind of see him hit that wall towards the middle of the season, and I think it wasn't just him. that team kind of hit a wall.
Yeah, it was Kansas City as a whole.
Yeah, because they were playing so well at the beginning of the season, and then once Alex Smith stopped throwing dimes, that's when they kind of started falling off a little bit. But Kareem Hunt, they leaned on him because they knew how good he was to kind of pick up the slack, and he couldn't. He couldn't do it by himself. And that's why I'm kind of worried about the Chiefs this season. At the beginning of the season, I think they'll pick it up towards the end, like we were talking about in one of the last episodes that we did, where I said the Chiefs will be 2-4 by week 6, because I don't know how Pat Mahomes is going to fill into Alex Smith's shoes, and especially Kareem Hunt being in his sophomore season and having such high expectations that he could sort of fall off. And I see that it is high risk, high reward, because like Nick said, he has a high ceiling and a low floor. So we'll see what he can do with the high expectations for him, and Pat Mahomes too. There's high expectations there. So I would have to agree that Kareem Hunt is high risk, but he's very high reward.
All right, so Kev, who do you got as your high risk, high reward player?
I went with T.Y. Hilton, wide receiver for the Indianapolis Colts. He is high risk because he hasn't really proven himself without Andrew Luck. Granted, his QBs have not been successful, and that team has lacked other offensive weapons the past few seasons, especially losing Dante Moncrief this offseason. And they don't really have a tight end or a running back. There's a running back battle back there right now between Naheem Hines and Marlon Mack. So we'll see where that happens. But them lacking the weapons, it doesn't really help T.Y.'s case. The 2017 season was his first season under 1,000 yards, which is a really sizable dent in his production. He's posted a 1,000-yard season since 2013, since he's been there. However, the risk surrounding him falls more on the side of whether Andrew Luck can stay healthy or not, because we've seen what happens when a quarterback like Jacoby Brissett is throwing to him. There's no production there. He's been absent more often than not these past couple seasons, and T.Y. Hilton is Andrew Luck's go-to guy. Andrew Luck has been unhealthy, and with no other receivers or clear-cut running back to take the pressure off Hilton. But with a healthy Andrew Luck, there is no doubt in my mind that Hilton could be a top 6 receiver for fantasy and post around 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns maybe. It's pretty bold, but I can see it happening. And I'd go with about 40% chance T.Y. Hilton falls victim to that lackluster offense, and 60% he exceeds expectations. So, I mean, pay attention to Andrew Luck this preseason. If he's healthy and looking like he's back in his old form, I would look to take T.Y. around the 5th round.
Yeah, that's about a good spot. You said a lot there. I think without Luck, like you said, he hasn't been himself. He's been good, but nothing special in the fantasy world.
He's been average at best.
I think you said just about everything. I'm looking forward to seeing him and Luck get back to it.
Can you see him getting over 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns? If Luck's healthy.
Definitely. Got to see how Luck bounces back. I mean, it's
really riding on him.
It's been so long since Andrew Luck's played.
Yeah.
That we're just going to have to wait and see. All right, that's it for today and possibly a long time, unfortunately. My goal has always been to make the product jump off the shelf while doing what I love, but I need to figure out if Controlled Chaos is for me, if this is for me. I'll always love talking football, but this is much more than just talking football. And I don't want to do this alone while I'm in school and working. I've been fortunate enough to have friends like Kev, Zach, Kyle, and the Chaos on the Beach crew to be guests on the show. But what I really need is behind-the-scenes help. So instead of just asking for you all to help, I'm going to, 1, take a break from the show for some time. It could be a month, could be a year, could be even longer. Then 2, I need to figure out if this is for me, because I don't know if it's still my passion. Like I said, I'll always love football, but I'm not sure if I really want to keep doing this. Then 3, if it is, then I'm going to recruit help, however that is, whether that's people I know at school, or somebody I meet, or whoever. And 4, lastly, this one is very important to me. I need to figure out a way to separate Chaos from brands like Barstool Sports, ESPN, NFL Network, etc. I will do my best to solve these problems and come back better than ever. But if this ain't for me, then it's been real, and I can't thank you all enough for supporting me and Controlled Chaos. This has been the greatest creative outlet for me, and I'll never forget it. So whether you're listening to me or not, enjoy the hell out of this football season. The $50 Visa gift card giveaway and the 2 episodes per week will be delayed along with the show. If you have any questions, feedback, or you want to help out, please contact me. The Controlled Chaos Instagram and Twitter accounts work best. DM me, email me, or contact me however you'd like. I'm sorry, but this is what needs to happen. Kev, any last thoughts for this episode or the show in general?
No, man. Thanks for having me on this episode and all the other ones. And I look forward to coming back whenever you decide that you're ready to make some more episodes.
It's been a pleasure. All right, well, I need to figure this out. And then, if I do this again, you'll absolutely be invited back. Love having you on the show. So have a great weekend. Listen to some other recent episodes. Kick some ass if you're playing fantasy football this season. Peace.